Hey guys, welcome to the video. Today we're going to talk about a classification of cults known as the cargo cults. This is the first entry on an iceberg chart created by the user MetaRuner, and the link for that is going to be in the description. My goal is to make this the first of a long list of videos discussing the different entries on this iceberg. With that explained, let's begin. I want to start to say that based on the criteria we discussed in the previous video, what is a cult? The link for that is in the description. I am not confident in saying that this group or group of groups is a cult. I'll go into why that is a bit more later. But I will still refer to them as cargo cults throughout the video just because this makes it easier for me. Cargo cults are groups that sprung up in the primitive island cultures of Melanesia from the late 19th century, and some of them are still active today. These groups, in short, base their beliefs around goods and materials or cargo that were given or dropped off by more advanced cultures. Thus, these groups began being called cargo cults. As I said previously, the location where most of these groups took place was Melanesia. Now, many of you may not know where Melanesia is. I certainly didn't until I looked it up for this video. But Melanesia is a large group of islands off the northeastern coast of Australia. Some of these islands include Papua New Guinea, Fiji, and the Solomon Islands. So what's the time frame? When did these groups exist? So the earliest known record of a cargo cult occurred in Fiji and was referred to as the Tika movement. And this happened in 1885. However, a vast majority of these groups appeared during the Second World War, as this was when the island cultures had most contact with outside civilizations. Some of these groups, according to my research, 8, are still active today. So this puts a comprehensive timeline of these groups from the year of 1885 to present day. How is a cargo cult formed? The cargo cult formation can be broken down into a sequence of a few different stages. The first stage is the arrival. This is when a more advanced civilization arrives and makes contact with the primitive tribe or group on the island. They would usually arrive and set up some form of military outpost. This was seen happening with both the Japanese and the Allies during World War II. The Japanese arrived and made contact with the islanders first, but as we'll see later, the Allies seemed to have a much more lasting impression. Now, the second stage can be seen as the cargo or gift phase. This is where the foreign civilization provides some form of goods to the islanders. These goods were seen to be food, clothing, and weapons, among other things. In some cases, these goods were given, in others they were received through trade. The third stage is the development of beliefs. The tribe members, usually led by a leader of some kind, would begin to see the foreign soldiers as some form of divine entity providing divine gifts. This came about because they never saw the goods being made. So they assumed that these goods were made by some supernatural means. These beliefs, however, seem to vary slightly depending on the specific group. But these beliefs are usually created and reinforced by a leader. It is often the case that the leader would claim to have visions or divine guidance leading them to these beliefs. Now, the last stage can be described as the ritual phase. After the wars ended, the soldiers left and the tribes eagerly waited for their return. They began to form rituals that they believed would bring the soldiers, along with the gifts, back to them. These rituals focused on mimicking the soldiers in appearance and behavior. So they could be seen making rifles out of sticks, dressing up in the soldiers' clothing, and marching in formation. It can also be noted that the tribes adopted a lot of Western symbolism. This can be seen with the Christian crosses that they put on their graves, and they could also be seen flying American flags. And this is specifically the case with the John Frum group, which is the most well-known cargo cult group. Now, with all that stated, are these groups cults? And based on the criteria that I discussed in the previous video, reminder that link is still in the description, I do not believe that this group of groups should be considered a cult. Now, I determine whether a group is a cult or not based on their tactics of control, deception, and exploitation. And I'm going to go into those briefly here. So, control. The reason why we look for control when determining if a group is a cult or not is that a cult cannot function without control. Cults utilize some form of control to keep their members involved and productive for the cult. Based on the information that I have, it does not appear that control tactics are being used on members of these groups. It is possible that it has happened in some of these groups, but I'm not seeing it as an overwhelming majority. Now, deception. The reason why we look for deception when determining if a group is a cult is that a cult cannot survive if their true beliefs and tactics are shown to their members. The members will then instead realize, hey, this is dangerous, and run the other way. The cult then needs to disguise themselves as something else in order to gain power and members. The only things that even remotely resemble deception with cargo cults is that, one, some of the leaders claim to be reincarnate of the soldiers that visited. This was also specifically seen with the John Frum cult. However, it is unclear if the leaders were intending to deceive the followers or if this was something that they also believed themselves. It was also known that in some cases the leaders of the groups would operate outside of towns and local government areas to avoid detection. Now, this does seem weird to me, but there could have been various reasons for why this was the case. Now, with all that stated, I don't see enough evidence to attribute the trait of deception to cargo cults as a whole. Now, exploitation. The reason that we look for exploitation when determining if a group is a cult is that all cults exploit their members in some way. Exploitation is usually a result of the aforementioned control and deception. The purpose of exploitation is to benefit the leader at the expense of the follower. Without these benefits, the leader would not have a motive for creating and maintaining a cult. When examining the cargo cult phenomenon, I found no evidence of the leaders exploiting their followers. Just like with control, it is possible that this was the case in some of the groups, but I did not see it as an overwhelming majority. So, based on my analysis of cargo cults, I haven't found enough to say that they even remotely resemble cults. So, if they're not cults, what are they? Well, I believe that referring to these groups as a cultural and religious phenomenon is much more appropriate than calling them cults. It seems as though these groups formed out of their circumstances. What I mean by this is these groups were by themselves. They were alone, they were isolated from the rest of civilization, and they had minimal knowledge even of the outside world. And it is likely that they were in this state for a very long time before they met with the visitors from more advanced civilizations. They were also living their lives in ways that were vastly different from the more advanced world. And when they visited, they were exposed to things that they simply could not understand. They had no knowledge of modern clothing, weapons, vehicles, or anything else. And this was undoubtedly something that was a shock to them, and furthermore, something they could not explain. They, much like us, had and have a need to make sense of the things that they don't understand. And they made sense of it the only way that they knew how. Eventually, this led to a belief system that worked for them and allowed them to make sense out of what they were experiencing. So, a dangerous cult? I don't think they're cults at all. I think they're simply groups that adopted a belief system in order to adapt and explain things that they couldn't understand. And in that way, they're really not all that different from us in the modern world. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I plan to continue pulling entries from this iceberg in order to create more content in the future. As I said before, if you have any ideas or suggestions for me to improve my channel or just any content that you'd like to see, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you could leave that in the comments below, that would be great. So again, thanks for watching. I enjoyed this video just like I enjoyed the first one. I hope you enjoyed watching it.